I've been hiking since I was a teenager, and the Grand Canyon had always been at the top of my list. It's one of those places that humbles you instantly. The air feels ancient, like it's been holding secrets longer than anything you can imagine. In 2014, I finally decided to go on a solo 2-day hike there. I'd been through dozens of trails before, even some dangerous ones, so I thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't realize how wrong I was until that trip. I arrived at the South Rim early one morning in late March. The weather was perfect, cool enough to hike without overheating, clear skies, just a slight wind rolling off the canyon walls. I checked in at the ranger station, told them my planned route, and headed out. I wasn't worried at all. I had everything: a GPS, food, radio, tent, water filtration kit, and a small first aid bag. I was prepared for anything. At least, that's what I thought. The first day went perfectly. I took my time, stopping to take photos and just admire the scale of the place. There were a few other hikers along the main trail, but by the afternoon, they'd all turned back. I wanted to camp near an overlook, known as Horseshoe Mesa, so I kept going even as the sun started dipping behind the cliffs. By dusk, I reached a flat clearing that seemed perfect for setting up camp. It was quiet, unnervingly quiet. If you've ever been that far out, you know the silence isn't peaceful. It's heavy. You can hear your heartbeat louder than anything else. I set up my tent, ate a quick meal, and radioed my friend Alex to check in. He laughed when I told him how eerie it felt being alone out there. "Man, you're going to freak yourself out," he said. I laughed too, but it didn't shake that uneasy feeling in my stomach. The canyon walls seemed to swallow sound. Every time I shifted, I half expected to hear something move back. Around 10 p.m., I decided to try to sleep. The moon was bright enough that its light filtered through the tent walls, so I didn't even need a lantern. I was drifting off when I heard it. My name. At first, I thought it was a dream. It was faint, stretched out by the distance, but I swear I heard someone call, "Ethan." I froze. My first thought was that another hiker must have gotten lost, but that didn't make sense. I hadn't seen anyone for hours, and there was no flashlight beam, no footsteps, just my name, whispered so softly it barely carried through the air. I sat there for a full minute, listening. Nothing. Then I laughed at myself again, telling myself it was the wind. I zipped up my sleeping bag and forced my eyes shut. A few minutes later, I heard it again, this time clearer. "Ethan, come here." That voice wasn't the wind. It sounded like a child, maybe a young boy or girl. But it was wrong somehow. The tone was off, stretched too long, like whoever it was didn't really understand how words should sound. I unzipped my tent and looked out. The moonlight lit up the canyon in a bluish glow. I couldn't see anyone, just rocks, shrubs, and endless darkness. "Hello," I called, my voice cracked. "Is someone out there?" Silence. I waited, then stepped out with my flashlight. I panned it around the cliffs, trying to spot movement. The beam caught nothing but stone and shadows. The air felt colder than before, almost like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a few minutes. I backed into my tent, zipped it up, and grabbed the radio. "Alex, you still up?" I said. Static. Then his voice came through. "Yeah, man, what's up?" I just heard someone out here," I said, trying to sound calm. "Like a kid." There was a pause. "A kid? Dude, you're in the middle of nowhere. Maybe an echo or something?" "Yeah," I said. "Maybe." But it didn't feel like an echo. I knew what echoes sounded like. The canyon makes them bounce in strange ways, but this had come from one direction, right outside my tent. Eventually, I managed to fall asleep again, though it was restless. Every time I woke up, I felt like something was standing just beyond the tent wall, listening. When the sun came up, I packed my stuff and tried to shake off the whole thing. It was probably just my brain playing tricks. I told myself that over and over as I started hiking again. For most of the day, it was normal. The view was incredible, and I even felt stupid for being scared. I made it about 6 miles before I decided to stop for lunch near a small stream. That's when I noticed something strange. A set of small footprints leading into the mud near the water. They were bare, like a child's feet, but there were no adult prints with them, no sign of shoes, and no indication anyone had been camping nearby. I followed them a few feet before they just stopped, like the person had vanished mid-step. I stood there for a long time, staring at those prints. The canyon wind howled through the rocks, and for a second, I thought I heard it again. That same faint voice calling my name, carried on the wind. That's when I decided to turn back. I didn't care about finishing the route anymore. Something about that place felt wrong. But the way back was harder than I expected. The landscape all looked the same, and the trail markers weren't where I remembered them being. I kept checking my GPS, but the signal kept flickering out. The more I tried to retrace my steps, the more it felt like the canyon was rearranging itself around me. By evening, I realized I was lost. My water was running low, and I hadn't seen the main path for hours. I set up camp again before it got dark. This time, I built a small fire. I needed the light, not for warmth, but to convince myself I wasn't completely alone. I ate a granola bar and stared into the flames. Then, just as I started to relax, I heard it again. Ethan. The voice was closer now. Directly, across from the firelight, just beyond the shadows. I gripped my flashlight and aimed it toward the sound. There was nothing there, no movement, no eyes, no body, just the sound of wind sweeping through the canyon. I shouted, "Who are you?" No answer. Then I heard laughter. It was soft and high-pitched, like a little kid laughing from behind a rock. I froze completely. I couldn't even breathe. The laughter didn't echo. It was close. Too close. That was it for me. I packed up my stuff in minutes, even though it was pitch black. I turned on my headlamp and just started walking, using my compass and GPS whenever the signal came through. I didn't care if I had to hike all night. I just needed to get out. At some point, I must have slipped or blacked out, because the next thing I remember is waking up at sunrise. My pack was beside me, but my shoes were gone. My feet were cut up and raw from walking on rocks. I had no idea where I was, just somewhere deep in the canyon, miles from where I'd started. When I finally found a trail again later that day, a ranger spotted me from a distance. I must have looked out of it because he rushed over and helped me back to a station. They gave me water, food, and checked for dehydration. I was fine physically, just shaken. When I told them what I'd heard, the ranger gave me a strange look. He said it wasn't the first time someone had mentioned voices down there. Some hikers hear calls for help that lead them off trail. Others say they hear names, their own names, whispered from the cliffs. He said the canyon does weird things to sound. Echoes bounce off the walls in unnatural ways, and sometimes they can seem like they're coming from right next to you. But the look on his face told me he didn't really believe that explanation either. Before I left, I asked him if any kids had gone missing there recently. He said no. But years ago, back in the 1970s, a young boy had disappeared while hiking with his family near the same section I camped at. They never found him. To this day, I can't explain what I heard. I don't go hiking alone anymore. Sometimes, when I'm in a quiet place, even at home, I still think I hear that same voice whisper my name from far away. It's always the same tone, the same faint, stretched-out sound, like something still wants me to follow it. My wife, Claire, and I have been hiking together for years. We've done the Appalachian Trail, Yosemite, Zion, but the Smoky Mountains were always our favorite. There's something about that mist and dense forest that feels timeless. You can hike for hours without seeing another person, just the sound of your boots crunching over leaves and the occasional distant rustle. But one trip in 2018 changed the way we looked at hiking forever. We were in Tennessee, near Clingman's Dome, one of the highest points in the Smoky Mountains. It was early fall, cool enough for jackets, and the leaves had just started to turn that deep orange and gold. The main trail up to the lookout was busy that morning, filled with tourists taking pictures. Claire and I prefer quieter routes, so we decided to take a lesser-known side trail that connected back to the main path later in the day. It was marked as safe, but lightly maintained, according to a ranger we spoke with. We figured we'd get a few hours of solitude before looping back to the main area by sunset. The first hour was perfect. The forest was calm, and a light fog rolled through the trees, making everything look dreamlike. The birds were quiet, and all we could hear were our footsteps and the wind pushing through the branches. But after about 90 minutes, I started noticing something odd. The trail markers looked different. Normally, they're small, square paint blazes on the trees, sometimes nailed with a metal plate. These ones were hand-painted, uneven, and darker. "Did you see this?" I asked Claire, pointing to one. She leaned closer. "That's not the same paint. Looks old." I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe it was an older trail that hadn't been updated. But a few minutes later, the ground started sloping in the wrong direction, downward instead of up toward the ridge. That wasn't supposed to happen based on the map we had. We checked our compass and GPS, but the coordinates didn't match the trailhead map anymore. The GPS flickered in and out like it couldn't get a signal. That's when we started to feel uneasy. "Let's just follow the markers back," Claire said, trying to sound calm. So we turned around. Only now, the markers behind us were gone. The trees we passed earlier were just bare bark. It didn't make sense. We couldn't have missed them. We'd just come that way. The forest felt different, too. The air was colder, heavier. It was like the deeper we went, the more sound was being swallowed. We called out a few times, but even our own voices seemed muffled. After another hour, we stopped to rest. We were both tense. I remember saying, "We're fine. We'll find the main trail again, just a wrong turn." But even I didn't believe that anymore. When we got up to keep moving, that's when Claire froze. "David," she whispered, pointing ahead. There was a new trail marker nailed to a tree about 20 feet away, but it wasn't like the others. It was freshly painted, bright white, with an arrow pointing right. The paint was still dripping. I got closer to it and a chill ran through me. The nail looked new too, clean metal, recently hammered in. Someone had just put it there. "Someone's messing with us," I said quietly. Claire looked around, scanning the trees. Who would even be out here? That's when we heard it, faint somewhere behind us, the sound of footsteps on leaves, slow, deliberate. We turned around, flashlights ready, but there was no one. Just the trees and the fog moving like breath through the forest. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. Then, after a few seconds, another sound, a knock, like a stick hitting wood. 3 times, knock, knock, knock. The echo carried through the trees. Claire grabbed my arm. "David, let's go." We followed the painted arrow because it was the only thing resembling direction. The path wound steeply downhill, twisting between thick brush. My instincts told me it was the wrong way, but panic had started to override logic. Every few minutes we'd spot another marker, each one leading us deeper downhill, and each one looked newer. The paint still tacky, the nails fresh. At one point, I swear I saw someone ahead of us, just a silhouette crossing between the trees, too quick to identify. I shouted, but they didn't respond. After another hour, we came to a small clearing. The air felt dead there. No wind, no birds. In the middle of the clearing was a single tree with 4 trail markers nailed into it, each pointing in a different direction. That's when I realized what had been happening. Someone was deliberately placing them, leading us. Claire was shaking. "This is wrong. We need to go back now." So we picked the direction that led uphill, hoping it would take us toward the main ridge. We walked in silence, except for the occasional rustle in the distance. Whatever it was following us. The sound would fade when we stopped and start again when we moved. It never got closer, just stayed at that same distance, like whoever or whatever it was wanted us to know it was there. By dusk, we were exhausted. Our GPS finally blinked back to life, showing us several miles off course. We decided to set up camp before it got completely dark. We were too tired to keep going. That night, the forest never slept. We heard movement, branches cracking, soft footsteps circling just outside the light of our small campfire. At one point, Claire whispered, "David, do you see that?" Across from us, through the trees, I saw a dim light, like someone holding a lantern, swaying slowly. I grabbed the flashlight and aimed it toward the glow, but the second I did, it vanished. The forest went dead quiet again. We barely slept that night. Every time I started to drift off, I'd hear something snap or move. It felt like someone was walking around us, over and over. When the sun finally rose, we didn't waste a second. We packed and started climbing uphill. We ignored every single marker we saw. Instead, we followed the compass, true north, back toward the main ridge. After hours of climbing, we finally broke through the fog and saw the main trail about 100 yards away. I've never felt so relieved in my life. When we got back to the ranger station that afternoon, we told them what happened. They didn't look surprised. The ranger just sighed and said, "You're not the first ones." Apparently, several hikers that season had reported finding handmade trail markers leading them off official paths, some even nailed up overnight. When park staff investigated, most of them were gone by morning. No one had ever been caught placing them. We told him about the footsteps, the knocking, the light. He said it was probably just other hikers or maybe hunters. But his tone didn't sound confident. Before we left, I asked him if anyone had ever gone missing there. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "A few. Most were never found. Claire and I don't hike in the Smokies anymore. We still go hiking, but we stick to main routes now, ones with people, with clear signs. Because out there in those woods, someone was leading us. And the scariest part isn't that we almost got lost. It's that whoever was out there wanted us to. I've been hiking Mount Hood in Oregon for almost a decade. It's one of those places that pulls you back no matter how many times you've been. The air feels cleaner, the views are unreal, and even though it can be dangerous, the trails always have a strange calm to them. That calm changed for me in 2020. It was late summer, and three of us, me, my friend Jordan, and his cousin Eric, decided to do a weekend trip up one of the less-traveled ridges. We planned to hike during the day, camp overnight, and head back the next morning. We'd done the same thing before, no problem. That afternoon was perfect. We set out under clear skies, the forest alive with the sound of running water and birds. We followed a narrow trail that wound upward through the evergreens, then leveled off into an open stretch with a great view of the mountain. By sunset, the sky had turned orange and gold, and the forest started to quiet down. That's when we noticed a faint smell, like smoke. "Someone's camping up here," Jordan said. Sure enough, about 100 yards ahead, we saw it, a single tent near a cluster of trees. The fabric was old and faded, maybe military surplus. There was a figure sitting just outside the tent, completely still, staring out at the trees. "Hey," Eric called out, waving. "Nice night for it, huh?" No answer. The man didn't move. He just sat there, motionless. I figured maybe he didn't hear us, so I raised my voice. "You good, man?" Still nothing, not even a twitch. It was weird, but we weren't trying to bother him. Some hikers just want to be left alone. We gave him space and set up our own camp about 50 yards away. After a while, the fire was going, and we started eating. But I couldn't stop glancing back toward that tent. The guy never moved, didn't light a fire, didn't go inside his tent, just sat there. Jordan finally said, "I'm going to go check on him. What if he's hurt or something?" I didn't love the idea, but he walked over anyway. I watched through the flicker of our campfire as he stopped a few feet away and said something I couldn't hear. Then he just stood there for a moment, waiting. After a few seconds, Jordan turned around and walked back, his face pale. "What happened?" I asked. "He's weird, man. He just stared at me. Didn't blink, didn't talk, didn't even look surprised I was there." "Maybe he's sleeping with his eyes open," Eric joked, trying to cut the tension, but Jordan didn't laugh. "I'm serious. His eyes moved when I spoke. He was listening." We tried to shrug it off, but the mood had shifted. The forest seemed heavier. Even the wind had died down. As night fell, the temperature dropped fast. We sat around the fire, talking quietly, trying not to keep looking toward the tent. But around 10 p.m., we noticed something strange. The smell of smoke again, strong this time. We turned to see a faint glow in the trees, the man's campfire, except it wasn't flickering. It was steady. Too steady. We stood up and looked closer. The glow wasn't from a flame. It was from inside his tent like a lantern, but the silhouette sitting outside was still there. "How's there light inside if he's sitting out?" Eric whispered. None of us had an answer. Then, just as suddenly, the glow went out. Total darkness. We didn't sleep much that night. Every little sound made us flinch. The crack of a branch, the wind shifting. Around 3 a.m., I thought I heard soft footsteps outside our camp. Not fast or heavy, just slow, steady steps, circling. I froze and whispered, "You guys awake?" Jordan whispered back immediately. "Yeah." The footsteps stopped when we spoke. For nearly a minute, everything went silent. Then we heard it again. Crunch, crunch, like someone walking just beyond the edge of the firelight. Eric finally grabbed his flashlight and aimed it toward the sound. Nothing. Just trees. But when he swept the beam to the left, it hit something, the other tent. It was gone. The spot where it had been was empty. No tent, no man, no fire, no footprints. Just flattened grass and a faint patch of ash. We didn't say a word after that. We stayed up until dawn, too scared to sleep. When morning came, we packed up and hiked straight back to the trailhead. The whole way down, none of us spoke about it. But before we left the area, we stopped at the ranger station to report what we saw. The ranger was quiet while I described the man, the tent, and the fact that it disappeared overnight. He finally asked, "You said the tent was old? Olive green?" "Yeah," I said. "Looked like an old army tent." He nodded slowly, opened a drawer, and pulled out a small file folder. Inside was a photograph, a faded picture of a middle-aged man standing next to the exact same kind of tent. "That man went missing up here 8 years ago," the ranger said. "Never found. That's his gear." My stomach dropped. The ranger said they'd done multiple searches after his disappearance. They found the tent once, years ago, but it had been torn and sun-bleached. Looked like it had been sitting out there for years. Then it vanished during another storm season and was never located again. I asked him how that was possible, how we could have seen it set up like it was brand new. He just shook his head. "You'd be surprised how many times people say they've seen him. Always around that ridge, always just sitting there." We left in silence. I've gone hiking since then, but not on Mount Hood. Every time I think about going back, I picture that man, sitting motionless by his tent, staring into the woods. And I keep wondering one thing. If he was really gone, who or what was listening when Jordan tried to talk to him?